we've been without vision now for too many decades of consumerism. However, if you go back to that idea back in the 19th century, that was one of the top discussions around those Russians and Americans, as well as some Canadians in British Columbia, even in Ottawa, who were intent on creating a new type of system in the post-Civil War age that was going to be defined around national cooperation, large-scale projects, and the extension of Abraham Lincoln's new transcontinental railway that was also being built in Russia, too. There was a sister project called the Trans-Siberian Railway. Largely the same people building it on both sides of the Atlantic were involved with this. In the Russian side, it was Philadelphia rail cars from the Baldwin Company were what was running on the locomotive across the terrain of the Siberian Peninsula and all the way across to Moscow. That was American, helped with American engineers, and the idea was to connect both of these continental rail systems through the Bering Strait to unite the old and new worlds. And a big part of why Canada was kept under the control of the British Empire has a lot to do with Britain's effort to stop that from happening and to continuously use Canada as a wedge to prevent Russian-American cooperation on the Arctic, which would have also provided a renewal for authentic Canadian nationalists and Canadian Republicans to establish an independent Canada around a large-scale orientation for opening up the Arctic as a futures-based platform. That was all prevented by this British sleight of hand.
Isn't it true that the gift of Alaska by Russia, or the sale to the States, it followed, like, and then almost like right afterwards, all of a sudden the British are like, oh no, and then here we go, we get Canada going. You know, it was a very close period of time when they thought, oh, we better take care of Canada as the wedge, as you were saying. I don't know what the time frame was between when Canada, our whole,
when it was
North American Act.
What? Check this out. This is crazy. And I'm making a documentary. It's going to be about a 30-minute documentary with Jason Dahl on this very story. May 30th was the date that Alaska was officially sold and signed over to the United States.
What year?
1867.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then a few days later that the DNA Act was passed in London. It had been already drafted in 1864 during the Civil War, but it was drafted because it was becoming apparent that the plans by the British Foreign Office to break up the Union and to thus reabsorb a weakened and divided United States back under the controls of the British Empire, that wasn't going to work. And so those final days of the Civil War was when the Charlestown Convention was called, that drafted the BNA Act, establishing or proposing to establish a Confederation of the North. Since the Confederation of the South was failing, the Confederation of the North was going to be aligned to the devoted to defense of the British Empire, which is what it says in our preamble of the Canadian so-called Constitution of 1867, and under the control of the Governor General, the Privy Council, the Lieutenant Governors would all be the unelected deep state that would be enmeshed within our Constitution to control this geopolitically high-value zone of North America as a monarchy of the North. So that was passed only in a few days after the sale of Alaska was effected to William Seward and surviving allies of Lincoln in America, who largely were able to only keep America alive because of Russia's intervention and the Russian provision of the naval fleets, right, to the coasts of New York and California.
And they're doing that now again, aren't they?
For a different reason now. Yeah. Now the Russian Navy is coming back to the Americas to get across a different message, unfortunately.
Well, they're still projecting, like, don't mess with me, I think, like, don't do what you're going to do. Don't do the bad stuff that you're thinking of doing.
Yeah, it's ironic here. And so this is actually an interesting historical irony. And you're right. That's the similar spirit, the same geostrategic thinking behind 1863 when Russia sent its naval fleet as a message to the British Empire to not openly support the Confederacy like they were promising, or the French that were also promising to do the same. Otherwise, it would be war with Russia. And today what you're seeing is a similar sort of message directed to a similar Hobbesian hegemonic worldview. Except the irony here, as well, is over the obvious fact that the United States is now acting like the British Empire was that it was fighting 150 years ago, is that Cuba was in the 1863 period, ironically, going to be the capital of the Knights of the Golden Circle Empire of slavery. I don't know if you heard about this.
No, that is wow.
Oh, let me go see if I could find an image quickly here. But yeah, the Knights of the Golden Circle was set up in 1853. You know, I'm gonna Knights of the Golden Circle. I'm just googling that fast here. Map.
Yeah.
It was set up in 1853, and its membership were effectively the leadership of the Confederacy as an esoteric Gnostic order with a black magic inner elite.
Really?
Yeah, Albert Pike, who went on to co-found the KKK, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was also a Freemason, like you said, a Freemason reformer, a disciple of Giuseppe Mazzini.
Bad guys. Yeah.
Here, I think I got it here. No, sorry.
That's fascinating because this kind of satanic death cult has existed, we're finding out, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the whole game, this great game, it's just the pieces shifting. I mean, we're seeing it played out in the open now more and more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't find a good image, but I'll send you a link.
People can
Google that. Knights of the Golden Circle. So what I was going to say is that their plan, after effectively breaking free and declaring their own pro-British Confederacy based on slavery, and again, not just Albert Pike, you had one of the co-founders of B'nai B'rith that was co-founded at the same time in 1853 in the United States as a sort of American branch of Mazzini's Young Europe movement, but that one with a Jewish Kabbalistic twist to it. It was Judah Benjamin, who was the Secretary of State under Jefferson Davis, who was the lead co-founder of that, which also had Masonic overlaps and still does to this very day. That was a big driving force for the growth of political Zionism in the 20th century. But these were all co-created around the same time. And the idea was that should the Confederacy be successful at breaking free and declaring its own pro-slave Confederacy, then it would grow and take over Central America, Mexico, obviously, a big chunk of the northern part of South America. And that's where you could draw like on a compass, with a compass on a map, the circle with the center being Cuba, which is why you had Oliver Sullivan and Cromwell, the Major Allen Dulles family institution that was later on at the driving force behind the growth of an Anglo-American establishment, and the CIA later on was behind the creation and the growth of United Fruit. United Company being what was used as a battering ram to take control economically of the nations of Latin America. And that was, they put a big amount of emphasis in establishing an infrastructure in Cuba before Fidel Castro kicked out the mafia. He kicked out United Fruit. He kicked out Mayor Lansky, who had a ton of casinos. That was always going to be that was what was going to be already in the 1850s or 1860s, the center of the empire. And that whole thing got subverted by the Russians working with Lincoln under Alexander II. Both Lincoln and Alexander II were assassinated for their defiance of the world empire. But they had a network of allies, some of whom did get assassinated, some of whom lived, who did continue the fight to extend the rail lines and development through the Arctic, which continued all the way till Nicholas II was advocating this before he was overthrown and killed with his family. And it was brought back again for a period in the 1940s under FDR and Henry Wallace with their Russian allies, who tried to revive this.
Was that with W.C. Bennett then, or he was a little later in BC?
W.C. Bennett was coming into power in 1952, so he was trying to revive that spirit, the premier of BC for 20 years. That's where I think he had that idea of opening up the Arctic, and he also saw Alaska and Yukon as very important to his ambitions to not just have hydroelectric power on the Peace River, but also even more north than that. But his idea was to extend rail, which he did all the way to Dease Lake, which was all cut off by his son when he was ousted. His son came in, and his son was a weird initiate of Esalen, along with Governor Brown's son in California, who also came in as governor of California, and cut off all their father's works and brought in a giant green agenda
Oh
to
no.
subvert everything. And I think that W.A.C. Bennett probably did die of a broken heart in many ways because of what he saw his own family do, his son do to his vision. But that, I think, his idea was, and as was Diefenbaker's vision, our prime minister for a few years in the 50s and 60s, was to use national power to provide economic incentives to companies that would build things in the real world, that would advance this opening up of the Arctic, that would work with Russia. Well, Russia was a little bit hard in the Cold War to talk that way. You couldn't just say that out loud.
Yeah.
But with Alaska, yes, and you had many governors in Alaska, Walter Hickel being one of many, who were also major proponents of both Canada-U.S. development of the Arctic, because there's a lot of resources up there, but there's not a lot of development of infrastructure, so you can't do much with those resources if you have no roads or rail.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people about like the fact that we have been deindustrializing our country for many decades, and some people just kind of blow it off and they say, "Oh, we don't need all that like infrastructure because we're small. We don't have a big population." I'm saying, do you know that like China has maglev? Can you describe some of these technologies? And it's like they say, "Well, we don't have enough population. That's why." Think of the change to our country if we had functioning rail, and what sort of technologies are out there in Asia right now that could be brought here to that improve lights. I know they got the bullet trains in Japan. I'm trying to connect Asia now.
Well, part of this whole Bering Strait rail tunnel vision, going back to the 19th century, it did involve, if you look at the designs, those who were promoting it, they were openly talking about connecting it not just into Russia which is about 100-kilometer gap, but also into China. There was the Russian-Chinese rail lines that were going down through Manchuria.
Do you have a map of that? That would be so great to show the audience, because people can't visualize it.
Handy on me. Yeah, I don't have it. Maybe, I could send you some images if you want to splice it in. If your editing techniques are good, you're welcome to. But I didn't prepare. Next time we talk, I'll prepare stuff.
We'll do that another time. I'll show it. Yeah, but it's not a big distance, is it?
No, it's so close. I can actually show something, I suppose. I think I can do a screen share with StreamYard, so I might as well try it out. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. All right, so I just opened up a little page on my my Canadian Patriot website, and it's under the title "Canada's Potential Eurasian Future: A Vision for the 21st Century and Beyond." With title "Canada Must Join the New Silk Road," with an image here featuring rail development. If people see it through the Bering Strait, connecting Canada through Alaska into Eurasia.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
it's a beautiful image. And so it goes through the philosophy of real development, like what do people have to think about regarding a science of physical economy. I start off by looking at an 1890 map of the world that was published by Lincoln's bodyguard, William Gilpin.
He was a great guy.
Yeah, such a good guy. First governor of Colorado, major promoter of global rail development and national banking. And as you can see in his map, he makes this is part of a broader book he wrote in 1890, where he outlines each of the different aspects of this global rail project, from Africa, Australia, the connection of the Darien Gap through Panama into South America to north, and everything hinges upon this key, the Bering Strait. And again, it's only 100 kilometers of separation between the continents. It's pretty close. That's why Russia sold Alaska to the United States, was to build this.
Friendship.
And both Russia and the United States governments in 1863 passed policies supporting extending telegraph lines through the Bering Strait to start it off, but that would be followed by rail. I go through different programs as it was revived again, as I mentioned, by Henry Wallace and Foreign Minister Molotov of Russia in 1942, and how that was sabotaged by the Anglo-American program for a Cold War. I have here a little quote from the gentleman I mentioned, Governor Walter Hickel, the Alaska's former governor. He gave an address to Russia's Council for the Study of Productive Forces and I think this was like 2005 or something. He wrote this and he said, as we look at goals for the 21st century, it is fitting that we bring Russia and America together. There couldn't be a more important symbol. I have believed for many years that it will happen, and the place to start is the Bering Strait. Let's
Wow.
build a link between our two great nations, a tunnel to move people, resources, and goods east to west, west to east. The world's greatest reserves of natural resources await in Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada. Let's build a rail connection to take that wealth to the world. Let's build a fiber optic cable to improve world telecommunications. Let's build long distance transmission lines to the 1.6 billion people on the earth who have no electricity. Show me any area in the world where there is a lack of energy, and I'll show you basic poverty.
Wow.
There is a direct tie-in between energy and poverty, energy and war, and energy and peace.
Wow, when was that written? Because what incredible wisdom. I mean, it's
It's
still is
great.
relevant or more today. What?
Yeah, I know. It's so powerful. And he died in 2010, but he was a huge patriot. He was the governor back in the 70s of Alaska.
Wow.
Real
I mean,
great voice of reason. And
yeah.
again, this policy was picked up by Russia in
Mhm.
2007. Putin came to Canada, he came to the United States. He offered the building of the Bering Strait Rail Tunnel. That's another image made by the Schiller Institute.
Mhm.
And Putin offered $60 billion to the US and Canadian governments to build it. We both said no at the time.
Oh, stupid.
Very.
Yeah.
The Chinese in 2014 gave it its full endorsement in a Chinese newspaper called the Global Times.
Mhm.
So it became the backbone of what was known as the Polar Silk Road in 2019. The Chinese officially sanctioned a new paradigm for Arctic development, which is also why China started building nuclear powered icebreakers. It has 3, Canada has 0,
Wow.
along with a major rail development strategy. So China's rail here, this is another image of one of the designs for the rail tunnel that could involve pipelines. Maglev rail could be extended as well through the Bering Strait. This would be underwater.
Right.
There's little
So
fish floating around right there.
think of
Um,
that, how that would enrich Canada and everyone here. It would be amazing. I think it's gonna. I personally believe it will happen. We have more and more moving towards that. What year you can't say, but it's undeniable